Titanic Talk with Nelson Aspen and Alexandra Boyd. Here we feature stories from the independent documentary Ship of Dreams Titanic movie diaries and everything else to do with the iconic ship. From James Cameron's epic groundbreaking movie to the history and legacy of Titanic herself. Join us and our special guests as we continue the 25th anniversary celebrations of Titanic. This is your first-class ticket to everything aboard the Ship of Dreams.
Welcome aboard and welcome back to this edition of Titanic Talk. I am Nelson Aspen with my dear friend and co-host Alexandra Boyd. And today we have a reunion of sorts with one of the stars of Titanic, immediately recognizable. And I don't know what he's been doing, what kind of sunscreen he's been using in Los Angeles these last 25 years, because he looks pretty much the same. You will recognize him from the stern as Mother at stern was clinging to the baby, saying it will all be over soon. You do remember there was a religious element. It was the priest who was comforting the huddled masses, clinging to the stern. Our friend James Lancaster, welcome to Titanic Talk.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the kind words, Nelson.
Well, we found you.
If anybody can recognize me from that, that's pretty incredible.
Well, you didn't even bother to wear a collar today, so I mean that makes it a little trickier. But the wonderful thing about Titanic, as Alexandra's documentary and all of these podcasts are revealing, is the degree of separation between Titanic cast, fans, audiences, etc. There's always one degree of separation that brings us all together. And in our case, James, your lovely wife, Elizabeth, was a college friend of mine who I just happened to run into in Los Angeles a week ago. And we got to talking and, we've got to get James involved with Ship of Dreams. And now here we are. Alexandra, this is the first you've seen of James in a quarter century, is that right?
It is, because when we all gathered together and wrote these diaries, there were 29 of us total, and James was one of them. And I just thought it would just be amazing to write down, to literally document step by step the process of hearing about an audition, auditioning, researching for an audition, and then walking onto that set for the first time, because of course everybody has a similar sort of jaw-dropping experience of being part of that film, especially when you walked on for the first time. And so we did it, and we tried to get a book published, but in 1998 you couldn't self-publish or do anything online. You had to, and it kind of just, nothing happened. But I still have all these diaries. So that's what a big bulk of the documentary is: Ship of Dreams, Titanic movie diaries. And then James's part, he did write his diary, but I couldn't find you. So we found you now. I mean, 25 years is a long time to try and stay in touch with people. And, but as you've proven, Nelson, it's through tiny degrees of separation.
Serendipity, It's there just happened to be an iceberg at that particular spot, and there just happened to be James's wife at that particular spot. You can't plan everything. What I was going through some of my Titanic history today and realized that there was an English Catholic priest named Thomas Byles who was said to have been at the stern offering words of comfort. So before we get James to read his diary entry, I'm just curious to know if James was aware of that real life priest, Father Byles.
Yeah, in fact, as an actor, that was the first mistake I made, because I had assumed since the first and last stop on the Atlantic before on its maiden voyage was in Cork, and he was a Catholic priest, I had assumed that he was Irish, but I did know of him. I just got his nationality wrong.
But there was an Irish priest, a Jesuit priest who got off at Cove, Queensland, was the one who took the famous photographs.
Oh, really?
Because he rode the first leg of the journey, and fortunately for his sake, got off. But so when you prepared your audition, was that priest on your mind?
Oh,
the real
absolutely.
life
I mean,
guy?
I did know he was I did know that he was a real person. And I think originally I had auditioned for The Shipbuilder, which Victor Garber eventually did. And I mean, later on, I realized for a priest to be there at that time, in that moment, you really had two choices. Either you could feel that God meant your whole life to be directed towards this point, to give comfort to people, or you put on a headscarf and jumped into the nearest lifeboat. You know, there's only two choices. But it was, he stayed with it.
Were you just reading Thomas Andrews' lines, or did you have to create your own monologue?
No, in actual fact, I was working on an episode of JAG at the time, and I heard they were making a movie of Titanic, and I basically called the agent and I said, look, the ship was built in Northern Ireland. I'm originally from Ireland. It was the crew, half of the crew was Irish. The last port of call was in Cork in the south of Ireland. If I can't get a job on this show, I'm done. You're done. We're out of here. So they originally put me up for the Shipbuilder, the Victor Garber role. And, you know, the audition process took so long. I was doing an episode of JAG, and I did the Victor Garber, and Cameron was up in Nova Scotia, I guess, looking at everything on tape, all the auditions that came up. So there was, massive, days and weeks went by in between, sending it off, doing it, hearing back. And eventually I heard back that they were interested in me for the priest. So I was off book on it. I mean, I had learned it. I put myself on tape, and they sent it off, and I didn't hear anything. And I mean, that was when the crazy story started for me about Titanic, because Elizabeth, who you know well, and I were newly married, and we were trying to have a child, and we were in the middle of in vitro fertilization, and we've been doing that for about a year, and we heard back. I know it was Friday the 13th, and I think it was 6th September 96, and we heard back that we were pregnant, and we were celebrating, and an hour later, my mother called to tell me my father had died. And this was all in the same day. So I had to finish up JAG, and I had one more shoot day on Monday. I think I flew out Monday night. My brother picked me up on Tuesday at Dublin Airport. And on the way home, he said, Mum wants us to read the lessons from the at the funeral, and he said, I'll do the Old Testament if you want to do the New Testament. And it was chapter and verse, the piece that I had just learned by heart, and sent off to Cameron. So I actually knew, I was off book. I knew it by heart, the piece that I had done from the Book of Revelation, I think it was, at my dad's funeral. And then I flew back, and 2 weeks later I was on the deck doing that. So if you think it was a little overwrought, which I often think now looking back on it, that was definitely a contribution to that. Yeah.
I couldn't say that was overwrought. I think it's the most, and I remember that story because I remember your diary, and we're going to have you read the diary in a minute, because it's so succinct and so beautiful. Is that I know that you're in that moment, there's no acting required. It's like this, and we've heard this from many actors too, that coupled with your own personal experience, but with the horror and the actual danger, the feeling of danger in those moments on that poop deck, that people's screams were their emotions, where they were sort of drawing or finding emotions that they had no idea where they were coming from, because it was just so dramatic and so intense to be imagining what those poor people were going through. I mean, Rebecca Klingler and I were at dinner the other week, and she was talking again about holding that little boy, and it'll all be over soon, it'll all be over. And I suddenly got this chill, this real chill of a woman holding on to her child right at the moment of death. And I think
it's also, it's hard to, sorry, it's actually hard to portray on film how terrifying that boat was as well. I mean, when that poop deck went up to, I think you start slipping down it when it goes to about 60 degrees, and it can go all the way to 90. You know, they separated the back, as you know, the back of the ship, and put it in a pool so that they were able to use the hydraulics, so the back end went up. And it truly was terrifying. It was more terrifying than it actually looks on, because now we're so used to special effects. It was, you know, having this thing and then just realizing the reality. What was extraordinary for me was standing up there, is not the most sliding down the deck past me, but also the stunt guys that were going off the side, and they were just going boom, 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 and then they climb back up and they go boom, 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 boom. And how nobody was killed on that, that's partly what was terrifying. You were expecting somebody to get really badly hurt.
James, how far did you as an actor have to go before they said, cut, all right, James, you can leave now? What was your production experience there?
Well, I was holding on to that, what do they call that thing? The thing you wrap around ropes around, show you my nautical expertise.
A cleat.
A cleat, indeed. And I think if I'd let it go at that I'd be gone. Because there was people, you know, kneeling in front of me, holding on to my legs, and when they let go, they slid down the deck. But Alexandra, you'll recognize this as an actor, because I had also decided, well, first of all, I'd been going up and down there for, I think I was on the film for about 6 weeks. They were flying me up and down to Los Angeles. You know, they'd bring me down, they'd put me in costume, makeup, hair. I would sleep in the dressing room, and then I'd go back to Los Angeles the next morning. And that happened 3 or 4 times before I actually got on set. They threw me a curve, because the piece that they had taken from Book of Revelation was a more modern version than would have been appropriate for the time, with like only 5 or 6 words different, which is, it would have been easier to give me a whole new monologue. So that was terrifying enough. But also, and you'll recognize this as an actor, my feeling is, give them the big one first, because it's so much easier to scale back on a performance than to build it. And I did. So that's the other reason why it was so big. And you know,
is the first one the one they took?
And that's what I was just going to say. And I said, oh, you know, I got the big one in the can. I thought, wow, that's great. Now I can pull back on this. And he said, cut, take, moving on.
Yeah.
So it actually was, it was one take.
Yeah. I think it's, I don't think.
Considering stories of how many takes he took on other shots, I was quite relieved.
I'm thinking about it now and I could choke up. It's, you know, and going back to our Titaniacs, you know, every frame of this film, you know, I'm sure they would have no issue with it either. I think, you know, it's very natural for actors to go, but I had so many different versions in me, and I could have done this and I could have done it that way. And they'll still end up choosing the one that they want. That's the one thing about film and TV, is that that's the element, unlike theater, where you can choose the moment and the delivery you give every night. But in a TV or a film, it's back to the director, you know.
And you remember, we were up on that poop deck for about 3 days before the camera got to us, because they were shooting all the way back. They were shooting Leo and Kate coming from the front of the ship, another nautical term of mine, to the back of the ship. So we were always in the background of those shots, those early shots. So
it's glorified extras. So yeah,
and you were watching this thing come towards you over 3 days, and it was fast. I mean, it's like a small city moving slowly towards you. So I mean, everything there, everything that was going on was, added to the terror of it. And eventually, they got, it's what's extraordinary is, they built this small town basically in a field and built this ship. It was extraordinary. And you're watching all the lights and the production and everything. And it's rolling towards you like a storm. And then it stops in front of you. And you have suddenly this pocket of silence that is all yours, which is just an extraordinary feeling. I mean, I certainly have never had a feeling like that in any other project that I've worked on.
Did you film anything beyond that scene that we know so well that didn't survive? I mean, did we see? Did you ever tumble down? Did you ever get wet?
No, thank God. Thank God I never got wet. They actually had some flashback. They had some flashback scenes. I didn't know I had any more after that, but then they did some flashbacks. Where they're coming down the stairs. They're all dead, and there's that flashback scene with Kate and Leo's reunion coming down the stairs under the clock, and I'm in a couple of those. Probably what Cameron doesn't know, and probably what most people don't know, is I played 2 or 3 roles in that film, because I was on the loop group that looped it when I got back to Los Angeles. I was part of this loop group that was, would recruit English, Irish actors. So I had done a lot of projects.
Explain a little bit what a loop group does.
A loop group is the people who do post-production sound. So they can add little lines, words, screams, lots of screaming. We did screams for weeks. And
Irish screams.
Down in the boiler room where they're shouting orders at each other. A waiter would come in and would say, "Can I get you something?" All of that stuff. The classic is, foot sounds, when you're walking down a gravel. They're always walking down a gravel path. That would be post-production sound stuff. And sometimes you get to loop your own lines, which I love. It gives you a second go at it. But I didn't have to do any of my own lines, but I was a waiter, and I think I said something like, "Can I get you something, man?" Or and then I was definitely one of the guys down in the boiler rooms shouting an order, or and then lots of other screams.
That's a lovely bit of Titanic trivia.
Yeah, I know, right?
Father Byles was also a waiter and a stoker.
And I hope,
I
know, I was very little uneasy that Cameron might find out.
Double dipping. Your priest character, though, must have been not a first-class priest, because if you had been a first-class priest, wouldn't you have been at that service where they were singing the hymn conducted by the captain about "To those in peril on the sea"? So, I mean, did you happen to know which class you came from?
No, I didn't actually.
Okay.
No.
I'm watching. I'm paying attention.
Yeah, no, I hadn't researched that in depth. I'm not sure if a captain might take precedence over an actual priest on a ship.
Yes, I'm wondering that too.
They do funerals and weddings and everything,
Yeah.
So they probably have the authority.
James, I'm dying to know about the diary. The diary. I mean, Alexandra sent you the copy of the diary that you wrote 25 years ago. Right. Did you have a copy of it? Have you?
I do indeed. I got it right here. Yeah.
Had you read it? Have you gone back to it? Is this the first time you've visited it in 25 years?
I've known this story. I mean, obviously, I know the story, but I tell this story all the time about this film, because this is actually the freakiest thing that's ever happened to me. This story.
Yes.
Just that confluence of events and coincidences and mysticism.
Would you read it? Go ahead, just without further ado.
And we expect it in one take, like your performance in Titanic.
All right, let's see if we can do this. Well, as soon as I heard they were doing a film of Titanic, I knew there must have been work for me. I'm being an Irish actor, and there was so many Irish and English on board, and both passengers and crew. The ship was built in Belfast. The last port of call before it sank was Cork in the south of Ireland. But so eventually I was asked to audition for the role of Father Thomas Byles, who was an English priest who was one of the passengers bound for New York. Since Cameron was already filming in Nova Scotia, the audition was put on tape in Los Angeles and sent to him. And that the scene they wanted me to prepare was set on the poop deck as the ship was going down. And Father Byles is reading a piece of John the Divine, chapter 21, verses 1 through 4. And a couple of weeks went by without hearing any more about it. And during that time, my wife and I had been undergoing fertility treatments, and were anxiously awaiting the results of our first in vitro fertilization procedure. It was Friday, the 13th of September, 1996, when we learned that the results were positive. Elizabeth was pregnant with our first child. And 20 minutes later, my mother called from Ireland to tell me my father had just died of a heart attack. So I was finishing up on an episode of JAG, so I couldn't, this was on a Friday, so I had to shoot again on Monday. And I think I went out Monday night, arrived in Dublin Tuesday morning. And my brother picked me up from the airport. And he said that my mother had asked us to read the lessons at the funeral. And she wanted my brother to read from the New Testament, asked me to read a piece from the book of Revelation, chapter 25, verses 1 to 4. And when I got back to Los Angeles, my agent called to say I'd been offered the part of Father Byles and I would be flying down to Rosarito in Mexico where they were filming. And we were shooting at night, so the sun was just setting over the Pacific as we drove down the coast to the set. I could see a faint glow on the horizon gradually brighten, and then suddenly the ship appeared, the four stacks jutting up into the night sky, surrounded by lights and cranes. The studio had been built especially for this production, and by the time I got there, it was like a small town with offices, facilities for catering, medical, costumes, hair and makeup, dressing rooms, 3 sound stages, and numerous construction buildings. And the centerpiece was the ship itself, built on a bluff overlooking the ocean, so that when you stood on the deck, it was as if you were already at sea. So it was 1 a.m. when I was called to the set. It was like walking through an enormous stadium lit up for a night game. As I stepped on deck, I still wasn't sure how the scene would play, but in the end, there was only one choice: for this man to have kept his faith in this situation. He could only have believed that God had directed his whole life to this point, to be with these people, to comfort them and prepare them for the next world. Then there was a pocket of silence in the midst of the chaos. The cameras rolled, and I began the piece I had rehearsed 2 weeks before. At my father's funeral. Sorry. Haven't looked at this in a while. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with man, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all the tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former world has passed away." Nice bit of writing, that.
Ah, fantastic. So, and you know, it still moves us, and it obviously still moves you, James.
Yeah, it's hard to tell that story, I have to say, but it's such a crazy story, you know. I'll tell it to anybody who'll listen, but it's actually, I never, you know, it's so I no longer remember the actual piece itself from the book of Revelation, so it's reading that actually that hits me the hardest.
Well, it's amazing actually what our brains and our hearts do retain.
Yeah.
You know, that there's even a theory that actors, when they learn to play somebody else, if you can learn and experience, put yourself in their shoes, literally, it's the same as if you had experienced what they are experiencing. There's a
Sure.
there's a scientific thing that goes on, that we think it's fake, or people think it's fake, it's made up, it's reproduced, but actually something chemical goes on in us, and when you learn to tap into that, as actors do, as they have to, it brings the same emotions, and it sorts out the talent from the talentless, you know, because those who really tap into it, or whose hearts and minds are open to it, can access it very easily. And of course you can, because you have this incredibly deeply personal story and experience connected to it.
And as they say, no acting required on this one.
Oh, it's a fantastic story. And
Beautiful.
I just love that, you know, we've all been dining out on our Titanic stories for 20 years.
I know.
And here we are still doing it.
I know, it's so funny.
James, when's the last time you saw the film? And what was the experience of it? Where were you? And
every now and then I'm passing by the television and it's on, and I'll sit down and watch it for a few minutes. It's an extraordinary thing. I mean, it's an extraordinary. I think just the first impression of seeing that, you know, that orange glow of this small city just rise out of this desert, you know, it was just phenomenal. I mean, I had heard that the locals, they had the medical facilities there. The locals were bringing their kids, their families, you know, for medical treatments. It was an unbelievable amount of money spent on this. Funny enough, as I was flying back, I would fly back and forward between, I think they flew us between Los Angeles and San Diego, and then they pick us up at a bus and bring us across the border. And I did this, you know, 4 or 5 times. And every time I got on that flight, there was another half dozen accountants on board heading south to see what was going on. Luckily, some of it went to me.
Yeah, and he just didn't stop. He just did not stop, and
it was crazy.
He got it right, didn't he? He got it right.
Yes, and nobody died. You know,
nobody died.
It was
in real life.
Crazy.
Yeah,
it was a lot more terrifying than it actually looks on screen. It's just so hard to depict in 2 dimensions, you know.
But I think it speaks to the stunt team and how well rehearsed they were. And, you know, I've talked about this with Nick Lauren, our producer on our film, who's a stunt coordinator and has been a stunt performer. You know, you kind of, there's a thrill in being a stunt performer, and you put yourself out there. That's what you sign up for, and injuries do happen, but they're kind of part of the game, and that's why they don't put the A-list actors in those spots, or untrained actors. So you know, it's down to the coordinator, and I'm sure there was some swearing and some hairy moments, but that's making movies. Yes,
it was an awful lot of, you know, the amount of people who were just, you know, unknown, who did incredible work on that film. The first assistant, apart from anything else, and I can't remember.
Josh McLaughlin.
God almighty!
What a job!
It must have been a hell of a job. If he continued in the business after doing that, the first assistant, because he has to deal with everything that goes down. And actually, that was a nice little button on my shot. Was a few of the crew were wearing these Titanic hats, and Josh came up to me with one of them after the take, and he said, "Here, this is for, you earned this." And I got one of those. Titanic hats, which was really nice.
Oh, you still have it?
Yeah, I think I do somewhere. I'll have to root around for it. But also,
don't tell Zach Douglas, one of our Titaniacs. He'll be sending you money. He'll have that off you.
You can start bidding on it. And the other thing that I because we've been watching, you know, Leo and Kate moving gradually, and so by the time they were standing right beside me when during that scene, because they're observers of this guy, and Leo said something like afterward, he said something to the effect of, God, now I kind of feel like this is real, and I thought that was very nice. That was very, very generous thing for him to say, because God knows they were kids and they had a lot on their minds as well. So God bless them.
And we know that 25 years ago on Friday the 13th, you found out you were going to be a father.
Oh yeah.
So give us what else has been going on in the last 25 years, James.
That was our
tell
first.
us what you're up to.
Where's that 25-year-old?
Oh my God, yeah, that's an interesting story in itself. He just appeared in Weird, the Al Yankovic movie. He played the guitarist in the band. He did a episode of.
Give him a name. He has a name.
Jack Lancaster.
Jack Lancaster.
So Google him. You'll find a tape on IMDb. Finally, an actor in the family. And he did an episode of Chicago Med. We just went to see him in something at the Goodman, which was extraordinary. And he was actually in London on a mini vacation and called back to Chicago. He just got 3 episodes on The Bear, the show about the restaurant in Chicago. It's a really good little show if you haven't seen it, which may turn into a recurring. We have no doubt about his future career. He's a wonderful, wonderful actor. We have another son, William, who is a filmmaker, did film at NYU for he graduated a year or 2 before. He's working in post-production in editing. And again, we have no doubt about his future achievements either. Wonderful, wonderful filmmaker.
It's fantastic. They got landed in the right place to fit their talents.
God knows we didn't encourage any of them to pursue this.
Well, I think it's useless to try and stop.
I know what the secret ingredient is, though. Even though Alexandra is in the Pacific Northwest, I'm in New York, and you're in Los Angeles, the common thread between us is that we all love El Coyote. It's the secret thing. Is the El Coyote margaritas.
Next time we're in town, I shall buy the first margarita.
Oh, we'll be there. Thank you so much, James. This has been just
an honor.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, it was such a pleasure. Thank you. And please, now that you know where I am, please keep in touch. I'd love to hear about all your future surprises.
And you're now part of the reborn Titanic.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, hit the subscribe button. For information on where you can see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, go to shipofdreamsfilm.com. Titanic Talk is a production of Ship of Dreams Film Limited.